have I have the great delight of being with my dear friend, Victoria Labalme today. And I just have to brag on Victoria for a little bit. In 2010, I wanted to be a professional speaker, and everybody pointed to Victoria as being the industry role model. And I thought, oh, I could never be cool enough. Well, fast forward to 2018. And I was about to go in front of 3,000 of the world's top speakers at National Speakers Association. I might have looked confident on the outside, but I was absolutely terrified. I had a horrible case of stage fright. So instead of going and peeing in the corner like the scared dog, I did something slightly different, took out my cell phone and I texted Victoria. Now, Victoria, do you remember this?
I totally remember this.
And I think it was like, I need your help. So as they were starting to get ready to introduce me, you and I met around backstage and somebody was waving at you like, hey, Victoria. And you just pulled me into the men's room. And I said, I'm scared. I not only do I not feel confident, I can't remember what to say. I have lost it. And you took me by the hands. Here, put out your hands. Took me by the hands and you said, all you have to do is figure out the one thing you need them to know. And immediately I thought, okay, this has stopped being terrifying and I'm ready. The one thing I need them to know. If I say nothing else, I dropped your hands. And just as they said, ladies and gentlemen, Sally Hogshead, I walked out on stage and said, if you have a message that matters, it's your responsibility to make sure that message is heard and remembered and acted upon. And just then I saw you sitting down in your chair and you looked at me like a proud mama. And that is who you are, that you have a gift for being able to help people when they're in a stage where they feel like they're taking a risk. They feel like they're doing something where they may want to stop or step away from the edge, whether it's completing a project, starting something that's a major initiative, doing it at work, at play, in their home, in their life, in their relationships, and be able to move forward, to be able to embrace that risk without knowing the exact action plan. And I am so happy to be talking with you here today about risk forward.
Aha, thank you so much for having me, and what a great opening story.
Tell us just a little bit about the book so we can kind of set the stage, literally and metaphorically.
Yeah, love it. So, Risk Forward is an experience. I say that because it's not your typical book, and you can attest to that, Sally.
Yeah.
Every page is different. It's highly designed, it's highly visual. In fact, I'm going to actually just do a little flip through right here because people will then know what I'm talking about. So, this is what it looks like inside. It's full color. Every page is different. Each chapter is very brief, a half a page, maybe 2 pages, sometimes just a page. And the intention behind the book is this experience around helping you, the reader, find your way, whether it's, as Sally said, on a project, whether it's a plan, a path, a presentation, anything where you're trying to come from within and express yourself and find your way against all the noise that's out there. And it's speaking to people, whether they're just out of college or whether they're leading a team or whether they've gone through divorce or facing a health crisis. In any situation, when you're in that phase of not knowing, a blank page, a blog, you name it, it helps you find your way.
I was thinking about you this weekend. I was at the beach and I was reading a book from 1973. It's one of my oldest books that I had when I was studying advertising. And it talks about the difference between linear thinking and lateral thinking. Linear thinking is somebody says there's treasure buried over there. Go get it. And so you find the exact axis and then you go down, you dig one hole all the way down. Lateral thinking is creative thinking, where the equivalent would be that you would put little holes all over the yard so that you could be testing and playing. Do you think that risk, being able to move forward with risk, does it require that we use more lateral thinking so that we're thinking about things creatively without one right answer?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know if I'd thought of it in that way. So I love that question. It's really more finding the way that's right for you. And for some people who are linear thinkers, that's the right path. This particular book is really designed for people. As I say, the opening line of the book is, some people in life know exactly what they want to achieve. This is a book
For
for
the
the
rest.
rest of us.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's about those times when we don't have that linear path in mind. And there are times in our lives when we're super clear, we have that goal, we know we're going, but there are other times when it's yet to be revealed. And in those moments, we find our way through curious steps. And this book is a series of prompts for those curious steps.
And a part of the piece of the new information here that I hadn't really thought of, Victoria, as I was reading the book, as I was experiencing the book, is there have been times where I have known that I didn't know what the end was. So I was okay with that, but I didn't feel okay with not knowing the steps.
Yeah.
Okay, so like 10 steps. I may not know what 10 is, but I better know what 9 is. And this book is liberating from that. Describe that.
Yeah, well, I'm so pleased that you used the word liberating, because it's something that I've heard from my early readers. They've just said, I feel so free, like this sense of ease. And the way it's written, because there's a lot of spare pages, so you have this visual ease, but also this sense of the pressure off, because we live in a world that prizes decisiveness and planning and goal setting. People talk about reverse engineering. If you don't know the end, you have to begin from the end. People say, if you don't know where you're going, you'll never get there. These tropes that we have been inculcated with have really screwed up, in my opinion, a lot of creativity. And it's often in that delicate phase that these unexpected opportunities or ideas arrive. And if we're too rigid in our approach, and I've worked with top executives at Starbucks and Microsoft and PayPal. I work with people who are speaking on big stages like TED and PBS. I work with entrepreneurs like yourself and others who run multi-million-dollar brands. I've worked with people around the world, Hollywood directors, and I can tell you, the top people, having worked with so many of them, they didn't always have a plan. And that's the secret I reveal in the book, that in that way. And so then we look at all the different ways we do find our way.
There have been a couple of times where you and I have been talking where we have our business model, but then we want to be able to find something else, either something that's going to be more profitable or more fulfilling, that as entrepreneurs, we want to be able to experiment. You've always given me dead on advice, but now I want to help you share that advice to the people who are joining us. Let's say I have a business, I have a day job, and maybe I'm not a fan of the word side hustle. Maybe there's something that I want to be able to branch into. How do I make the transition in a way that's responsible for the economic responsibilities that I have? So it's not black or white binary jump.
Right. Well, and I appreciate that very much, because there's this misconception that we have to have this huge jump, and I call it a micro risk. So how can we take these small steps in the direction of what we want to do? And it could be something as simple as looking at the books on your bookshelf and saying, I think I'm going to try looking at that one, which I haven't looked at in a long time. Or maybe you're looking on Amazon and you're like, I might look at that, or on Netflix. So it's these micro risks that often take us in the path that we're meant to go. The challenge we often have is people are afraid to begin because they don't know how it's going to turn out. So for example, one of my clients, she always wanted to do some stand-up comedy. She has a full-time job. And she said, how am I going to do this? The pandemic is going on. I've got 2 kids. I'll never be able to get in a comedy club. I can't. And she'd put all these blocks in her way. And I just said, start small. Start with the video on your phone. Try something we can do, a little private session. You don't even have to post it. But these little steps that can take us. And, when I work with big executives, sometimes, they want to have the whole master plan. And I'm like, let's just get up and start seeing. Let's start riffing. Let's see where it takes us. So we work with these V cards, these colored index cards. It's a whole system that I have that helps them just free it up. So risking forward is not, quit the job, move to another country. It could be that, but it's really how even in our daily jobs, in our day-to-day 9 to 5, or our day-to-day current vocation, take these small creative risks that start to help us express ourselves in our own unique way.
So let me ask you a question. What about those times when we feel like it doesn't have to do with work? Maybe we're in a relationship in which we feel stuck. We feel like maybe it's a toxic friendship. Maybe it's a relationship that's run its course, but taking that risk. ripping the Band-Aid is going to be hard. It's going to be painful, and it's maybe a mistake. And it's hard for us to trust ourselves in those moments. How do we have that conversation with ourselves?
To trust ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, I think it starts by honoring, the first part of the book, as I talk about honoring what I call is the fog of not knowing. So first, just to recognize that we're in that fog, and that could be for minutes when we're in the midst of a project, or it could be for months if we're looking at a much bigger choice in our lives. But in those moments, it's like to first recognize that it's okay to be in the fog, because our society tells us it's not okay. And so that creates this extra panic. Like we go back to your opening story about being at the National Speakers Association, part of the panic was just, shoot, what am I going to say? But part of it's, I should know what I'm going to say. And I'm screwed if I don't know it, and I'm this close to going on. All these voices in my head are telling me I'll do different things. That's the stuff we want to take out, right? So then we can hear our own voice, what I refer to as this inner current. And then we start testing these ideas out, right? So, whether I'm teaching presentation skills where I say, let's try it out. Let's see what it feels like. And then people immediately go, oh, no, that's not it. So it's that micro risk, that micro test to start to see, does this feel right? Or to put an idea out with someone that's a safe ear, not necessarily even your partner in life. It could be, it could be a colleague, but someone who kind of gives us that space. And then to be very careful about the input we get. Because another client of mine who's come through my risk forward experience, we were in a little video with some other colleagues, and she said, oh, I have this idea of something I really want to try. And it was wild. It was totally off the path from what she's been doing. I won't say what it is because I want to protect her confidence. But like if you'd been doing apples and someone said, let's do, watermelons. And you're like, okay, that's totally different than apples. Or not even, it's maybe the same. She says, I'm going to do wrenches, right? Complete, right? And so it was one of those. But immediately what happened is the group wanted to show that they were supportive. So it's like, oh, that's so cool. And then what happened, which I think is very dangerous, and I put the kibosh on it, is people started giving her advice immediately. Like, oh, have you read such and such? Have you done that? Oh, I know someone who's got X going on. And immediately they were giving her input, but you have to be so careful about that early input because then you can't hear your own voice. And that goes back to you with what you were going to say on stage. So much of it was other people's thoughts. And so we have to protect our own vision.
And as one thing that I have thought of many times as you've been talking about the concept behind this book before it was published was how often there's an element of serendipity that say you're here,
right?
You may like here, you may not like here, but you take a step, and even if you say, oh no, I don't want that, that's good information. Oh, okay,
great information, totally, right.
And so, when I was writing Fascinate in 2009, it was a terrible time to be releasing a high concept business book. And so during the 3-month period while the book was getting printed, put on trucks, going out to Barnes and Noble, I worked on a personality test. And the reason why I created the personality test was I didn't have enough money to be able to pay for any kind of fancy launch PR. Right. And long story short, looking back in 2010 when the book came out, the book went okay, but that turned into the Fascinate test. And I think without even having read your book, I think I was probably following in that confident, humble intuition that you describe.
Yeah. I love that. I love that story. Yeah. And you have no idea what's going to come out of that. And so often when people set a really clear goal and they put on blinders, and you were open to other ways forward. And if anyone listening to this, watching this, thinks back on some of the best experiences of your life or career, I guarantee you a good portion of them did not come through a plan or a goal.
Do you think plans and goals are becoming archaic? Is there, the gold retirement watch has been retired?
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. No, I mean, I'm all for plans and goals. Like I have plans and goals in my life. I think they're valuable. All I'm saying is when they're not coming from within and what's it's called goal contagion, when we start to adopt other people's goals. It's like everyone has the same. When I was doing a lot of one-on-one private coaching in Rock the Room, people would come to me and they'd say, I want a best-selling book and a TED Talk. And I was like, you and about 10,000 other people who have talked to me. But where did that come from? Was it from within? It's de rigueur in the entrepreneurial market right now to say, I want to impact 100 million lives or 10 million lives. But the people are pulling these numbers out. But where did that really come from? And so we just want to make sure that what we're choosing lights us up.
If you're writing a book, the book takes, I think something people don't realize when they're launching a book like yours is it took you a long time to formulate a truly original idea. And then you have a publisher. And then, you've got the baby swaddled.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Let's say somebody wants to risk forward, but you can start to tell it's not going well. Either you're not loving it or your audience is not loving it. Your audience meaning your consumer, your client. How do you back up?
Yeah, well, I think, that feedback can be really valuable. It depends on who's giving it, and also there's something in the book that I talk about called the V, which is, I won't give it away because it's a really cool section of the book where I talk about, your vision and a V and being careful that you stay within that V. But what happens is, sometimes we get feedback that's completely off the mark. And sometimes we get feedback that I believe we know in our heart, if it's the right feedback, if it's intended to be helpful, if it's in line with where we want to go. And if it's not working, we'll feel it too. It's like a relationship. Like if it's not working for one person, it's probably not working for the other person, if you're honest. And so to that degree, it really is case specific in terms of clients that I've worked with. I had one guy, he came through an experience, a risk forward experience, and he came up to me. The idea here was to share a thought, a wisp of an idea that you had, and put it in front of the group. And he pulled me aside. He's like, well, I have this thing, but I don't know. I haven't really totally figured it all out, but I kind of want to give it a shot. I said, I think this is the opportunity for that. And he stood up in front of, there were 12 entrepreneurs, and he stood up and he shared this barely formed but pretty brilliant business idea of a morning, this is before COVID, a morning ritual where from 5:30 a.m. to 7 a.m. people would co-work and get their project done, and he called it Project Finished. And we all lit up, our eyes lit up. He saw the response. It wasn't all perfect there. There were problems with it. Some things were off the mark, but the core of it was on. And I think we know that when the core is on.
When I worked in advertising, there's something that was very similar to that I have always found is really good criteria that this builds upon. When you're coming up with a lot of ideas in the brainstorming process of advertising, and you need to follow a specific strategy, but there are a lot of different ways that you could say that in a television commercial. And so we would put the ideas out on a table, and each person in the creative department got a handful of paper clips, and they would put the paper clip down on the one that they responded to the most. Now, it's not like you want to get a focus group. So this was a trusted focus group. It wasn't like, pulling in the boss's wife.
Right.
But here was the criteria that was very helpful to me. So imagine it's me saying to the group, I don't care if you don't like it. I care if you don't get it. So liking something is totally subjective, but if you don't get something, in other words, if you have a very significant concern that this isn't going to work or it doesn't hit you, to me, that's like a different kind of feedback. Do you have any coaching on the kind of feedback that we should be listening to versus not listening to?
Right. I think it depends on the phase of the project. So, for example, when I take people through the course, I say when someone shares a new idea, the only feedback you're allowed to give them, the first thing that you're only allowed to say is, cool. Like, because we don't want, back to my friend, client, you don't want them saying, oh, have you thought of, have you done? Because that's not what they need. At that phase, all they need is the confidence and the courage to keep going. Yeah. They don't need input. It's too early, right? But when, in a different setting, like when I'm teaching presentation, I'll say, after the first question we ask someone after they've shared something is, how did it feel to them? Because then they can course correct and say, oh, I jumbled this whole section. I wasn't clear. So they can say, where they screwed up. So that's the first thing, is for them to self-evaluate. In your situation with like, how is it landing? Is it coming across? That's more of a communication messaging issue. Like,
Towards the end.
right. What's the result? And when I teach, I often say, what's the know, do, feel? How do we want them to know? What knowledge? What do we want them to do? What action? And what feeling do we want to instill in them? And so that's another way to test, is it really coming across? But with risk forward, the first piece is really for ourselves right away. And because we're so trained to not listen to what delights us. And that is, I'm all about the audience. It's like the number one thing I teach with Rock the Room when I say, pay attention. But with risking forward, if we're going to really rock our room, it starts with risking forward. And risking forward is first about your heart. Like, what kind of do you want to say? And people are terrified to put their ideas forward.
Do you think that certain people have a greater appetite for risk, so this concept will be easier for them, whereas other people feel like they need to know all the details, they need the spreadsheet before they can move forward?
Yeah, this book's not for them.
So
right?
Going to target audiences.
Actually, but you know what? I think what's amazing, actually, is, I say that facetiously, but whenever you publish a book, they say, well, who's the target audience? And I'll tell you something, the people that we thought would not love this book are eating this book up. It's like the people that are super logical, because they're saying this is so freeing. Like, I have a 9-figure business. I'm an engineer by training, all that kind of left brain organized thinking. They're finding a whole new approach. And especially because the style of the writing, it's not woo woo. It's not in the clouds. It's grounded. It's tactical. People see the book as a guide so they can flip through it, and they find that helpful. Like that freeing kind of, let me look for what I need.
It is Magic 8-Ball-ish.
Yeah, totally. Right.
Future is uncertain. Okay, I'll turn the page.
Right, exactly. Go to the section that, you're intuitively drawn to, and see what message is there for you. Right.
Okay, what was the part of this process of writing the book, publishing the book, that freaked the beep out of you? That was so scary that you almost pulled back?
I think going down with this message, I think that, as I say at the end of the book, writing the book, Risk Forward, was itself a risk forward. And people would go like, oh, that's so funny, because I would say, when I was scared, when we become known for something in our businesses, or we have a big track record in something, or we get paid a lot of money for something, to then go off that message a little bit is a risk. No. And I felt, though, that this is something that really needed to be said. So back to you and your opening story, if you have a message, it's your responsibility. I was like, this, I think, is something that needs to be said, because I saw a lot of people suffering, myself included, because there was so much subtle disdain for people who were unclear, indecisive. And I wanted to address that and say, this is a problem in our society. And people are coming out of the woodwork to sort of say, I suffered this too, and thank you so much for saying this. So that was the risk, because it wasn't the content that I've been teaching and speaking about for decades. It was something else, but something I felt was important. So that was a risk.
Yeah, I mean, there have been times in your career in which you have been the world's leading expert on presenting those messages, and not just building the message and creating what a CEO of a Fortune 100 company is going to say, but also how they're going to say it. And right. Now this is a redirection. So were there those little tinges in the middle of the night?
Oh, 100%, 100%. Just talk to my husband. But I also feel like, it's so interesting, because I spoke to some very well-known artists and about this process, one a writer, one a Hollywood filmmaker. And I said, I could do X, which is what I've been paid a lot of money for over the years, and I built or I could do Y. And it was so clear that Y is the one that excited me, even though it was the scary one. And that's the one any artist will tell you got to do. You got to do the one that scares you.
What if somebody is in an environment where, we are fish swimming in a world of risk, and so we don't even see the risk because there's so little that's certain. Do you know what I mean? There's very little that we can absolutely count on, the way we thought we could before. Right now, as this is going on, for somebody who is afraid they may lose their job or they may lose their target audience, it may be that if they sell Instagram ads and Instagram's going to dry up, how can people be safe and risky?
Yeah, well, I think starting with the recognition that we've never really had safety. It's like, I think this period has really taught us that we've always been in uncertain times. It just became more apparent. This is something I say a lot because, I watched 9/11 from my bedroom window. Who would have thought? And my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She was yoga and green tea. Who would have thought? And so, we never have security that our job will be there, our health will be there, our relationships. Everything is precarious, and I think that's a beautiful way to recognize life because it makes us wake up and appreciate it. So that's the first thing I would say is, wow, that kind of awareness to not take things for granted. Number one. Number two, to see that opportunity that comes because it is that sea legs feeling like what is happening now, but to say, well, wow, this is an opportunity, to sort of start to speak from the heart, to move from the heart, to see like, how could I? Like there's a section of the book about, I will give a piece of it away here, and it's something called 4 questions. And it's a section to help you find your way when it's a little turbulent like now. And one of the questions I have, the first one is, what interests you now?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
and it could be, if you're a frontline worker, it could be, I'm interested in kindness. It could be something like that. Or if you're in a career change, it could be, I'm interested in pursuing X. If you're just a housewife at home and, you're struggling with all the pressures, which, I so respect, my God, what a hard job to keep the family going. It's like, what interests you now about how you want to set up the home? And anything like that. It's just all the different opportunities for just finding that thread to pull us forward.
Something that I have seen in our that you and I both have had the opportunity to do is help people when they don't feel confident, give them the tools, insight, and inspiration to be confident. In my case, it's through fascination. When you know what makes you fascinating, you're going to be far more likely to stand up there, take a stand, make a stand, and do the work that needs to get done in order for you to reach your ultimate potential. And you have done it not only through your entire life, but with this book. Let me ask it, what do you think is the role of being fascinating in risking forward?
What is the role of being fascinated? Well, I think, meaning how does one be fascinating as you risk forward?
If I feel confident and I feel like my words matter, and I feel like I have something to say out in the world that the world needs right now, does
Yeah.
that help me risk forward?
100%, because you care less about what other people think. And I think also when we are lit from within and we're, in your words, fascinating, we're taking what I would call the prism effect, which is all the colors, the full spectrum of who we are. In fact, yes, exactly. When we first met, Sally, I was talking about that in Florida, like the whole prism concept of these colors. And so if we harness all of who we are, and you and I are very aligned in our messaging there, like what makes you different, your whole, different is better, right? This is brilliant. And mine is similar in that it's like, how do we take all of who we are, and not hide parts of who we are? And that kind of embracing of it and then putting it forward. And as people start to respond, like when I do these events and people start to like, oh, it's okay for me to do X or Y and express myself in this way, people go, that's you, because what we want more than anything is the authentic person, right? And it's like people with kids, I always say, your kids are dying for you to be lit up. They don't really care how kooky it is. Like they love that. They just revel in seeing you as a parent lit up. And so get out the trombone from, from, right? And like they'll complain about it, but they will love it because that's what we need to role model is like expression and joy and who we really are. And whether that's like playing with your chess pieces or your Lego set, or that's getting out the trombone, it's like that full expression is life.
Tell us where we can find the book. Tell us where we can connect with you.
I love it. Well, the book is Risk Forward. And so the website, riskforward.com. And if you go /book, you'll find out all the different special items there. So riskforward.com /book. And that site will also take you to links to me. So that is the homegrown, home base place to go.
Great. Okay, so if we want to buy the book, we want to share the book, we want to share this experience.
Yes.
Because this is the kind of book that when you give it to somebody, you can know that you're giving them something that's an opportunity that their soul is crying out for right now. And then you can talk about the book. In fact, what I did is I have a copy and Ed has a copy, and we've gone through it section by section and talking about it because it's so easy to consume, but the concepts are high level. The concepts are rich without it being dragged down by little things called words.
Yeah.
100,000 words. And this has been a real gift to me because as much as I love creativity, there hasn't really been a methodology and a feeling of having that permission to be vulnerable in this process. So, Miss V, yes. I appreciate you and I appreciate this book. So for everybody who's listening to us, remember riskforward.com /book, and then let me know in the comments what you think and what your favorite part is. My favorite part, Victoria, is the person you were being when you wrote this book. This is like having a conversation with you, and I love you with all my heart.
Likewise, my dear. Thank you so much for having me.
Mwah.